I was standing in my closet at 3 a.m. with my phone flashlight pointed at a hole in the drywall that hadn't been there the week before, and on the other side of it, something breathed. That's where this story ends up. Let me back up. I moved in with my roommate Dana in my second year of college, found through a mutual friend, split a 2-bedroom off campus to save money. She seemed normal at first. Quiet, kept to herself, always up before I was. The apartment was old, the kind of place with creaky floors and a radiator that clanked. So I didn't think much of it the first time I heard something odd. It was a scratching sound, faint, coming from somewhere behind my closet wall, late at night. I told myself it was mice. Old buildings get mice. I didn't even mention it to Dana. 2 weeks later, it happened again, except this time it wasn't just scratching. It was rhythmic. 3 taps, a pause, 3 taps, like someone testing whether the wall was hollow. I lay there in the dark, convincing myself it was pipes settling, the building doing its old building thing. And eventually I fell back asleep, because that's easier than getting up to check. The third time, I actually got up. I put my ear against the closet wall, and the tapping stopped instantly, like whatever was doing it knew I was there. I told Dana about it the next morning over coffee, half joking, and she got quiet in a way I noticed, but didn't think much of at the time. She said the building was old. These things happen, and changed the subject fast enough that I let it go. A week after that, I woke up to my bedroom door standing wide open. I always locked it, a habit from a bad living situation the year before, and I remembered locking it that night specifically because Dana had mentioned going out. I told myself I must have forgotten that I was tired, that this was a completely explainable thing. I checked the lock. It worked fine. No signs of forced entry. I just chalked it up to my own mistake and moved on with my day because the alternative was too unsettling to sit with. That night, the tapping came back, except it didn't stay in one spot. It moved, closet wall, then the wall behind my headboard, then, faintly, from somewhere near the floor by my door, like something circling the room from the outside, checking every possible point of entry. I sat up in the dark, phone flashlight in hand, too scared to actually get up. Just as I was about to convince myself to go back to sleep, the tapping stopped directly behind my closet wall and didn't move again. I got up. I don't know why. I think some part of me needed to prove to myself that nothing was there. I opened the closet, pulled back my hanging clothes, and found a hole in the drywall near the baseboard that I was positive hadn't been there before, small, maybe the size of a fist, with the edges pushed inward instead of outward, like something had been working at it from the other side. I put my flashlight up to it and looked through, and for one full second I swear I saw something move. Not a shape, just a shift in the dark, and then unmistakably I heard breathing. Slow, close, right on the other side of that wall. I didn't sleep in that room again that night. I sat in the living room with every light on until the sun came up. And when Dana finally emerged from her room around 9, I told her everything, the tapping, the door, the hole, the breathing. She went pale in a way that had nothing to do with sympathy. It was closer to panic. She finally admitted it. The apartment had a second, unfinished storage crawl space behind our two bedrooms, accessible only from a panel in the hallway closet. Something the landlord had never disclosed and Dana had discovered by accident months before I moved in. She'd been letting her ex-boyfriend stay in there, off and on, for weeks after he lost his housing, and she didn't want to tell me because she knew I'd say no. He'd been coming and going at night, using the crawl space to move between the walls to avoid being seen, tapping to communicate with Dana through the drywall, using a system only the two of them knew. The hole in my closet wasn't paranormal. It was him working through the drywall from the crawl space side, trying to widen an opening into my room without me noticing, for reasons neither of them fully explained to me afterward. I called the police that morning. He was gone by the time they arrived, and to this day, I don't know exactly how long he'd actually been in there before I first heard the tapping, or how many nights he was inches from my bed, with nothing but half an inch of drywall between us. I found my roommate Kai through a listing app, split a place downtown that was way nicer than I could have afforded alone. Everything checked out. He had a job, paid on time, kept common areas clean. The apartment had a third door off the hallway that Kai told me on move-in day was a locked storage closet. The landlord's stuff. Nothing to worry about. I didn't think twice. Every apartment has a random locked door. About a month in, I started noticing the hallway light flicker specifically when I walked past that door. Never anywhere else in the apartment. I told myself it was a bad bulb, an old building's wiring doing what old wiring does, and I replaced the bulb myself just to rule it out. It flickered again 3 days later, same spot, same door. Then I started hearing music. Faint, muffled, like it was coming from behind that door. Always late. Always after Kai had supposedly gone to bed. I asked him about it once, casually, and he said it was probably just noise traveling from a neighboring unit. Apartments like this have thin walls. It sounded reasonable enough that I let it go, mostly because I didn't want to be the roommate who made things weird over nothing. The music kept happening though, almost every night by the third week, and it started to sound less like something bleeding through from next door and more like it was coming from inside our apartment, low and constant. The kind of sound you'd expect from someone falling asleep with headphones half on. I brought it up again, more directly this time, and Kai's answer changed. Now it was the building's old ventilation system, carrying sound from somewhere else in the complex. Two different explanations for the same sound, weeks apart, and I remember noticing that but talking myself out of caring. The night everything changed, I got up around 2 a.m. for water and walked past that door, just as the flickering started again. Except this time it didn't stop after a few seconds. It kept going, faster, and underneath the music I heard something I hadn't before. A voice, low, saying something I couldn't make out, followed by what sounded unmistakably like someone shifting their weight on old floorboards, right on the other side of that door. I didn't confront it that night. I went back to my room, locked my door for the first time since moving in, and lay awake until morning. The next day, while Kai was at work, I found the spare key ring in the kitchen drawer, and one of the unlabeled keys fit the lock. It wasn't storage. It was a fully furnished bedroom, a bed, a lamp, clothes in the closet that weren't Kai's size, and a speaker on the nightstand still quietly playing music on a loop. Taped to the wall above the bed were printed photos, dozens of them, of me, walking to my car, at the mailbox, through our own apartment windows, spanning back months before I'd even signed the lease. I moved out within 48 hours and filed a police report. It turned out Kai had specifically targeted the listing toward me after finding my old apartment search posts on a roommate forum. The whole thing had never been random. I still don't fully know how long he'd been watching before I ever answered his message, or what that room was actually for. For 2 months, I lived with someone whose name I didn't actually know. My roommate situation started normal enough. Split a 2-bedroom with someone named Priya. Found through a college housing board. Moved in during a rushed August before the semester started. We got along fine at first, though something about her felt inconsistent in small ways I couldn't quite place. Sometimes warm and talkative, other times distant, like she barely recognized our conversations from the day before. I told myself, people are just like that sometimes, moody, adjusting to a new place, and didn't think much of it. The first real thing that unsettled me was small. I found my bedroom door unlocked one morning. Despite locking it every night without fail, a habit I'd had for years. Nothing was missing, nothing disturbed. I decided I must have forgotten, even though I was almost certain I hadn't, because the alternative felt paranoid. A week later, I noticed one of my sweaters folded differently than I'd left it, sitting on my desk instead of my dresser. I asked Priya if she'd been in my room for any reason, and she said no, immediately, a little too fast, then quickly added that maybe I'd just misremembered where I put it. I wanted to believe her. It was easier than the alternative. Then came the night I woke up to find my bedroom door standing open again, except this time Priya was standing in the doorway, perfectly still, not saying anything, just watching me in the dark. When I sat up and asked what was going on, she blinked, like she'd just woken up herself, and said she must have been sleepwalking, apologized, and went back to her room. I chose to believe that too, because sleepwalking is a real explainable thing, and I desperately wanted an explainable thing. The final incident happened almost 3 weeks later. I came home early from a class that got cancelled and heard 2 voices coming from Priya's room. Hers and another one that sounded almost identical, just slightly different in pitch, having what sounded like an argument through the wall. I stood in the hallway, certain I was about to catch her having a normal conversation with a friend on speakerphone, and knocked. The door opened, and Priya answered. Except something about her felt subtly wrong. a stiffness in the way she held herself that didn't match how she normally stood. Behind her, sitting on the bed, was another woman who looked enough like Priya to be her sister, wearing the same style of clothes Priya usually wore, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. It turned out to be exactly that, a twin sister, Rhea, who had been secretly staying in the apartment for weeks, taking turns with Priya attending classes, answering messages, and even living in the space under the same identity. For reasons tied to a legal situation Rhea was trying to avoid dealing with under her own name. The unlocked door, the moved sweater, the sleepwalking. I'd been living with two different people wearing one name the entire time, and I'd never once been able to tell which one I was actually talking to on any given day. I moved out before the semester ended.